Welcome, dear listeners, to the Psychonaut Café podcast, where we embark on a mind-expanding voyage through the realm of psychedelics and spirituality. I'm your host, Sergio, and today we're diving deep into the mysterious, transformative, and enlightening world of psychedelics, and in particular, the connection with the spirit realm. Joining me today is a dear friend of mine who I have met along my travels in the psychedelic space. She has a very interesting journey, and I asked her to come on and give us a taste of her experience in the spiritual path. That being said, let's get into it. Thank you. And basically what we'd like to do before we dive into our discussion, I'd like to give you the opportunity, Sylvie, to introduce yourself. So can you give us like a little bit of an introduction about yourself and maybe a little bit of your relationship with psychedelics and also your connection with the spirit realm?
So my name is Sylvie. I go by, I have a business called Crystalline Moose, where I provide intuitive readings, energy healings, and sell products. I came into the psychedelic world in 2017 after having gone through, I guess, what would be known in the spiritual world as the Night of the Dark Soul that had lasted about 6-7 years at that point. And something needed to change. And at that point, I was ready to try anything. And it changed my life. It certainly, I had already started, I guess, not consciously dabbling in the psychic world, in connecting with spirit. I guess what I've been told is that I've always been connected, and that's why I can't tell the difference when I'm not and when I am, because I'm just always on. But definitely when I journeyed into the psychedelics, it's like it opened the door a little bit wider than what it was before. It certainly made me more aware of visions that I was getting, differentiating between the voices I was hearing, that I was receiving, that they came from a different place. And I think it is the psychedelics that helped that.
Yeah. So, and it's fascinating because obviously as we are growing into space, we're trying to make heads and tails about what's actually going on. And we're trying to understand it a little bit better. And I think the psychedelic aspect also, I believe you mentioned it one time, where it basically removes certain filters, and these certain filters probably enhance your ability to communicate and whatnot, right?
I think so. Yes, I would certainly say so. I mean, I can't say for sure, only because I didn't realize my psychic abilities very much prior to my psychedelic experience. So
And what sparked your interest with connecting with the spirits? Like, how did that journey influence, and also how did that journey influence your life? So you must have somehow have an inclining to connect with the spirits, and then how do you see yourself after having this connection?
I've always been fascinated by the spiritual world, by ghosts, psychics, mediums, fortune tellers, anything of that sort, paranormal activity. I've always been intrigued by it and always been fascinated by it. And I remember always thinking, man, those people are so cool. I wish I could do that. I wish I could do that. But at the same time, even as a child, I always knew that what I was seeing, hearing, tasting, and touching, that there was more to everything. I've always had the philosophy of everything happens for a reason, and it's always part of a much bigger picture.
Right.
And I found myself several times as a child saying things to the adults around me, things that there's no way that a child my age would know or should know. And they would just be truths that would just fall out of my face before I would even realize what I would say. And it was only after I would look at the expressions on the people's faces around me that I would realize that maybe I said something I ought not have said for whatever reason, either because it was beyond my would be considered my normal understanding, or because it was a truth that nobody wanted out and I just spilled the beans without even realizing it had been hidden in the first place. And then as I got older and life became more complicated and stuff started happening, I just had a sense that what was happening to me was not the normal, and I wasn't depressed. I didn't have anxiety disorder. There was just something else going on. And I wasn't getting the answers that I that made sense to me from the medical community. And so I started searching beyond that into the more natural healing modalities.
Mm,
And what tends to attract people in the natural healing modalities or alternative healing modalities are usually people who are spiritual, who do have some kind of psychic ability that they're developing or working. Or and I started meeting people who were telling me, well, actually you are gifted, you have these abilities and you're able to do this, and you've been doing it all your life, and try this and try that and try this exercise. And as I kept testing myself, I kept realizing that, oh my god, they're right.
mm.
Now what?
Right. And that's where all this, fascination to trying to understand what's going on is I think the issue right now. It's not mainstream, therefore it's not very easy to get this information somewhere. And
No, it's not.
right, and when you do get the information, it could be skewed, it could be you could, you're trying to make sense of it all. And obviously I think one of the aspects about just reading about certain things does help, but I think when you actually live something so profound, and I'm thinking about the experiences with ayahuasca and stuff like that, and maybe also for me it was something that was really interesting, especially that's one of the interesting aspects about the connection I have with you, which was basically to have had this spirit visit me in under an ayahuasca ceremony, which technically speaking had no real bearing on the relationship between you and I, because I had just met you that time.
Right.
And just to see how, based on this connection that I had with the spirit realm through the medium of ayahuasca, made me more aware and made it more concrete of a belief system that these things do exist and these things do occur. So it is very interesting how we can actually blend these things together, because one thing is living the experience, but there's like another defining moment where we need to confirm it. And I think through these psychedelic experiences, we can actually we use those terms to confirm what I'm actually living is to be true. Of course, to a certain degree, but I mean, like it's really fascinating. So, can you share one of your memorable encounters with a spirit, and how has that influenced your spiritual journey?
Wow, there have been many. I think the most profound that in terms of the spirit, I mean, it's after my about a year after my son died, I was at a psychic fair, and I ran into these two women. And I went to that fair with the intention of booking a session with a medium that could connect me with my son, because I was really missing him. And anyways, everybody's list was full. The one person that I did get an appointment with was just horrible, with saying stuff that didn't even make any sense at all. Like, she had me working and I had been on leave. So anyways,
Hmm.
um, but within the people that were attending that event, I was in a room and I was looking for a sign up sheet for a specific booth. And but from the corner of my eye, I could see this woman standing there. And I was just trying to navigate myself so that I wouldn't knock her on her butt, but also look for the sign up sheet. And all of a sudden I turned around and there she was in front of me. And I just went, oh, and I'm thinking, I'm sorry. And she looks at me, she goes, hi, how are you?
Hmm.
And as if she knows me. And I'm thinking to myself, I have no clue who you are, or maybe I forgot who you are. And then she looks at me and she goes, oh, she says, you just closed your heart chakra on me. And at that point, I had been practicing Reiki. So I knew she was speaking a language that I was familiar with. So inside, I felt, you need to stop and you need to listen to this lady. So, and then she puts her hand on my arm and she says, oh, she says, you lost somebody. And I just looked at her and I said, yeah. She says, oh, he wasn't old. He was 15.
Hmm.
And And I said, yeah. She says, why is he showing me his room? And I said, because he died in his room. And she said, why is he showing me the color green? And I said, that's his favorite color. And as she's speaking to me, I can see her looking across the room at another woman, and they're making eye contact, but they're not speaking to each other. So the second woman starts heading towards us, and she's got tears in her eyes and this look of shock. And at this point, I'm bolted to the floor. I can't move even if I wanted to. I don't know why, but I can't move. And I can totally tell that I need to stay here with these two women. So the second woman shows up, and the first woman who started speaking to me looks at her friend and says, I don't understand. He hung himself. No, it's suffocation, but he didn't. He hung himself, but it's not suicide. Well, that was a detail that nobody knew. He died playing the choking game. So right then and there, and I just looked at her, I said, my son won't come. He doesn't like crowds. And she looks at me and she says, no, he is here. He is very much here. Then I start shaking, like uncontrollably shaking, like you've seen how I can shake uncontrollably. So they pull me to the side, and they say, we need to talk to you. We have a message from God. And I'm, of course, at this point, I'm overwhelmed. So I'm standing face to face with the second woman, and she looks at me and she said, he didn't do it on purpose. And I said, I know it's an accident, and I'm not angry. I really miss him. And then she says, you're alone, right? And I said, yes. And she says, he never wanted you to be left alone. And so I start crying. And then I look at her, and I swear to you, Sergio, it was my son. I just looked at her, my jaw dropped, my eyes were popping out of my head, and all she did was look at me and nod and pulled me into her arms. And at that moment, I felt him. Somehow he had entered her body, and we hugged each other. And that was like a super intense spiritual experience for me, where I connected with a passed on person. So, and my son. And it was kind of weird, because after we just kind of pulled away, and I just looked at them and I said, so, by the way, my name is Sylvie.
First introductions, right?
First impressions, those were massive. But there's been so many that I could keep you on here for hours.
Right. And that's the beauty about all this, I think, and hearing your story of how you're overcoming this anxiety, you're overcoming these. Obviously, it's not easy, it's not simple. I mean, these are very hard events in our life, and ideally we shouldn't necessarily be stuck in them, but we are, and it's very hard to get out of them. But obviously, when we find some sort of spiritual connection, and we start to live these experiences, which are very hard to explain. I mean, these kind of conversations are not going to be necessarily listened to by the mainstream. A lot of people,
no,
they'll have their own opinions about it. But the truth of the matter, I think, is very crucial, to the point where these things are real. It's hard to make them sound real, but they are real. They're real to us. And it's actually tools that help us get better, because you've come a very long way, Sylvia, and it's really beautiful how the universe, once it starts to embrace you, the benefits are tenfold, right? I mean, and I think that's the beauty about your story, how you came to understand these things to be true, and how now you're embracing it, and in turn, you're also now experiencing these things for yourself, and you're doing something really positive with it. I mean, I have nothing but huge comments of positive remarks on the readings that you've done. I still have, friends that are, they ask me about you. It's like, oh yeah, and that, that person who did that reading for me, and how's she doing, and this, that, and the other. And it's very interesting how this creates a bond by sharing these connections with the spirits, and eventually, we'll usually, I see, and this is maybe another question towards you, maybe the last one, but usually we hear all these positive things, like we're hearing these positive experiences with the spirit world. But in your experience, have you ever encountered maybe one of these negative experience? Have you ever encountered a spirit or an entity that seemed negative or hostile in this spiritual experience?
Yes, actually, I've had a couple. I had one where I was working with a client and who had an entity in her, and I always burn sage, and I always have a white candle burning. And as I'm going through the process, I was removing stuff from inside her. We were clearing the energy, and the candle was between us, and I leaned over to touch her, and my hair caught fire.
Oh,
And the flame went all the way up the side of my face. It never burnt my skin. I did not panic at all. It was really, really strange because I was in my shaman mode. So I think she just said, yeah, I know who you are. I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to scare me. Go away. I just put it out. That was fine. But what happened is after that ball of negative energy entity came out of my client, what was really weird is as she was explaining her experience to me, all of a sudden I felt it try and find a new host in me. And I just waved my hand in a symbol, and I basically pushed it through the earth back to where it came from. But it left sort of like a skid mark. It wasn't expecting me to be that quick and feel it coming and stop it in its track. And I essentially scared it, and it left a little trace of ooh on its way out of my space, out of my zone, out of my home. And so I was left with this grayish sort of energy that made it difficult for me to focus. And I had very little energy. So I had to smudge my home and clear it, and do some Reiki clearing on it. But that was probably the closest I can't say that I was scared, but it certainly made me more aware of what is out there. And that was the first time that I had come across something like that.
right. And that's the interesting aspect of all this, is that once again, I mean, this might sound bizarre to other people out there, especially people that are not familiar or aware that these things exist, and that's the fascinating aspect where people like us, psychonauts who are traveling through this realm, are starting to have some kind of connections with certain things that exist, and at the same time, in turn, we're trying to make heads or tails of this experience as well, for us, for our sanity as well. So, yeah. So thank you, Sylvie. This is really enlightening. It's very interesting. Like you said, I think we could probably do, hours on end on this topic alone. And even you're super interesting, and a lot of interesting experiences that you must have. And maybe we can save this for future podcasts. So on that note, I leave you. Thank you very much. And we'll see how this plays out in the coming episodes.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sergio. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Sylvie. So thank you, everyone, for joining us on this enlightening and transformative journey through the realm of psychedelics and connection with the spirits. Remember, exploration and curiosity can lead to incredible discoveries, but it's essential to approach psychedelics with respect and awareness. Until next time, keep exploring your inner worlds and embracing the wonders of your psychedelic experience.